Today we're going to talk about the rise of absolute monarchs and religious violence in Europe. You should add this to your Unit 3 notes. If you need to pause this, you can pause it and write down what's on the slides, or you can back up and hear my voice again. We left off talking about the Protestant Reformation and how this split in the Catholic Church caused a lot of violence. So we're going to see about the violence that it causes and how Europe goes from feudalism, where the nobles have a lot of power, to absolute monarchies, where kings have all the power. After the Protestant Reformation, the Catholics get a little concerned. They decide that they need to reform the church to try to keep people from converting to Protestantism, from becoming Protestants. So the new pope tries to end a lot of the corruption in the church. The other thing the pope does is try to encourage monarchs, kings and queens, to persecute Protestants, to drive them out, and to enforce Catholicism. In Spain, which is in Western Europe, these two leaders, Ferdinand and Isabella, lead different parts of Spain. They get married and they unify Spain. So Spain becomes a lot more powerful because of them. They are devout Catholics, and they follow the Pope's lead, and they force Muslims and Jews living in Spain to either convert to Catholicism to become Catholic or leave. This is known as the Spanish Inquisition. Jews have been experiencing a lot of discrimination in Europe. Not only has there been religious violence with the Crusades in the 1000s to about 1200s. Remember when the Western Europeans go over there to the Byzantine Empire for their holy war, and on the way they're going to fight the Muslims, but they end up killing a lot of Jews. Jews also get kind of a bad deal because during the Black Death, during the bubonic plague, Western Europeans don't understand why the plague is spreading. They don't understand about the fleas and the rats. And so they think that Jews are poisoning the wells. And so sometimes they try to drive them out of their areas, and other times they kill them. So fast forwarding to Spain, the Muslims and Jews are either expected to convert to Catholicism or they have to leave Spain. Do you remember this guy from the movie? This is Charles V. He is the Holy Roman Emperor. The joke about the Holy Roman Empire is that it's not holy, it's not Roman, and it's not an empire. It's an area of German states in Central Europe that is controlled by an emperor that is elected by the princes, like Prince Frederick in the movie. He helps elect the emperor. So Charles V is the emperor in the movie. He is a Habsburg. The Habsburg family is an important family in Europe, and they're a royal family. They control a lot of areas, and they're known for this ugly chin that you see here. But Charles V is also the grandson of Ferdinand and Isabella. He's the same dude from Luther, like I said. He is a devout Catholic like his grandparents. He controls Spain and Central Europe. Central Europe is the Holy Roman Empire, and Spain he inherited from his grandparents. He fights the Muslim Ottomans. The Ottomans are Turkish people who are taking over most of the Middle East. You probably have seen them in your independent study work. And he also fights Protestants. So if you remember at the end of the Luther movie, he wants Luther dead. It's Prince Frederick that's protecting Luther. But eventually he gets tired of all this fighting and he gives up and becomes a monk. When he does that, he steps off the throne. He gives the Holy Roman Empire to his brother Ferdinand, that Central European area, and he gives Spain to his son, Philip II. So that empire that he controlled is split between the German states and Spain. So here on the map you can see Spain on the left and you can see the German states on the right. Meanwhile, there are a lot of religious issues in France. There is a marriage that is supposed to be planned between the French princess and this French noble, whose name is Henry IV. He is a Huguenot, which is a Protestant, a French Protestant. And they're hoping that this marriage between this Catholic princess and this Huguenot or Protestant noble will end some of the religious issues. Only problem is the girl's mother doesn't like it. Her mother's name is Catherine de' Medici. She's part of that Medici family from Florence. She's a descendant of them. And she's also a devout Catholic. So she has this plan. And at their wedding, between her daughter and Henry IV, she plans to have all of the Protestant wedding guests, including the groom, killed. And this big fight breaks out. Henry IV doesn't die, but there's a big fight, and it spreads into the street. It's known as the St. Bartholomew's Day Massacre, where people are fighting each other and killing each other, all in the streets of Paris over religion. But Henry IV becomes King of France anyway. He marries the girl anyway, which would make holidays a little awkward. When he becomes king, he agrees to become a Catholic, and he says Paris is worth a mass. Mass is like a Catholic church service. He says Paris is worth a mass. Think about what that means, and we'll talk about it later. After he becomes king, he issues the Edict of Nantes, which gives freedom to the Huguenots, to the Protestants. So he grants religious toleration. They're allowed to practice Protestantism in 1598. Meanwhile, in England, there is this king named Henry VIII. He's this guy on the right. He's really handsome, don't you think? I say that because I think it's a little bit funny, and he's dressed a little funny too. But during the time, he was like a hunk. He was like the man to marry, the most eligible bachelor. He was married first to this woman named Catherine of Aragon. She was part of the Spanish royal family, so she was a descendant of Ferdinand and Isabella. And they're married for a while, and she has one child, but it's a girl. And that's a problem because he wants a boy. He needs a boy to carry on the royal family, to be the king. He doesn't think a girl can be the queen. So he ends up having a thing with one of her servants. He has an affair with her, and he gets her pregnant. Her name is Anne Boleyn. And he has a problem because he's hoping Anne Boleyn is pregnant with a boy. So he wants a divorce from Catherine of Aragon, this woman from the Spanish royal family. Only problem is he's Catholic, and for Catholics to get a divorce in this time period, they had to get special approval from the Pope. So he calls up the Pope and he's like, "Hey, Mr. Pope, can I divorce my wife?" And the Pope says, "Let me think about it." And he's like, no way. And here's why. The Holy Roman Emperor, Charles V, has invaded Rome, and he has got the Pope basically captive. And remember, Charles V is related to Catherine of Aragon. So he's like, "No way, Jose, Henry, we cannot do this divorce thing." And Henry says, "Who do you think you are?" So he goes to his parliament. That's like a governing body, a lawmaking body that he works with. He says, "We should start our own church." And that's what he does. So he starts his own church, puts himself at the top, called the Anglican Church, which is just another way to say the English church, and grants himself a divorce. Unfortunately, once he remarries, he marries the woman he has pregnant, his second wife, Anne Boleyn. She comes up with a girl too. So he's really upset. He keeps hoping for a boy and he doesn't get one. And finally he decides he has to get rid of this wife too. But he doesn't need 2 divorces because that looks kind of bad. So instead he accuses her of a crime and beheads his second wife, Anne Boleyn. After that, he has a boy, but the boy's kind of sickly and dies young. And so his oldest daughter, the daughter from his first marriage, Mary, becomes the queen. And she marries Charles V's son, Philip II, from Spain. She is a devout Catholic, and she persecutes Protestants. She is nicknamed Bloody Mary for all the Protestants that she killed. So Mary's not a very good queen, and she gets kicked off the throne. and Elizabeth I comes on the throne. This is Henry's daughter with Anne Boleyn, that second child of his. She is a Protestant, but she is also a very wise ruler. She's very savvy, and she combines Protestant and Catholic religious practices to keep the peace between both groups. Everybody expects her to marry, but she refuses to get married. So she's nicknamed the Virgin Queen. That's where our state, Virginia, comes from. We'll talk about that more when we talk about exploration. And she rules for a long time. This time period is known as the Elizabethan age, so it's named after her. So because of Elizabeth, some of the religious violence that's been going on in England, where you see a switch from Catholic to Anglican and then back to Catholic with Mary and some persecution, and then now back to Protestantism, the tension is eased, it's relaxed. Back to the Renaissance for a second. So we're moving away from our monarchs and thinking about something else. This is Da Vinci's man. Da Vinci, remember, he's the one who did the Mona Lisa and the Last Supper, and he is really a Renaissance man. He is talented in a lot of different areas. And one of the things he is most interested in is anatomy. So he'll go out in the middle of the night and steal dead bodies, which was illegal at the time, to study how the different parts of the body fit together, how they work, and tries to use that to draw things more realistically. But Da Vinci is an example of this new interest in science. So the Renaissance leads us to some scientific discovery. People questioned some of the old ideas and didn't explain things through magic the way that they used to. Copernicus is a scientist who argues that the sun is the center of the universe, that the universe is heliocentric, that it is sun-centered. Unlike what the Catholics thought at the time, and what people had thought of since Greece, that the earth was geocentric, or that the world was geocentric, that the earth was the center and that everything else was around it, and that it was fixed, that it didn't move. So here's Copernicus, and here's his theory, that the sun is the center and that everything moves around it. Kepler is another scientist who made a model of the planet and thought about elliptical orbits, that the things were moving in an oval around the sun instead of a circle. So the church and these ancient Greek and Roman thinkers thought that the earth was the center and that everything stood still, and that everything was in a perfect circle. And that made sense to them because they thought that the world was perfect and never changed. So this is a really big kind of blow to how they understand the world. It's messing them up in the head. Then Galileo invents the telescope. And when he does that, he realizes and gets some evidence to prove that Copernicus was right, that the universe is heliocentric and that things are moving. And the Catholic Church doesn't like this because it goes against their teaching. So they want to excommunicate him. They want to kick him out. And he is dragged in and forced to recant or take back the things that he discovered. And legend has it that on his way out, after he says, "I take it back, I didn't mean it, I was wrong," he whispered, "Yet it moves," so that he didn't really take it back. Newton, you might have heard of before. You might have heard of the apple dropping on his head. He is a scientist that discovered the laws of gravity and motion. And so he's known as one of the greatest scientists of all time. People are now concerned with natural law. So how things are naturally. Trying to understand how the world works and to try to control how the world works. And to use the scientific method, the idea of a hypothesis and testing the hypothesis and drawing conclusions, something you've probably learned about since you were a kid, to try to understand the world. And this is a new thing. There are new philosophers. There are new philosophers like Descartes, who says, "I think, therefore I am." So they're concerned with philosophy, how the world works, and where they fit in the world. There are new maps, there are compasses, new ships. There's a desire for increased trade coming from the Crusades, and there's money available because we've shifted to a money economy. And this leads countries to begin the age of exploration.